We started the Igros Moshe on Shiduchim. All right, we already saw the Igros Moshe on the Rebbe case, and so we're on that second Igros Moshe that I sent you, the Even Ezer, 91. Everybody, right? We started it last time, if I remember correctly. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So again, it's very different. The Shiduchim in those days very different. But we'll just touch on it a little bit. Then I want to go to two other cases. I'll just tell you the two cases we're going to talk about, not seeing them inside, but they're long tshuvas on the two cases. I think I mentioned one before. One was a used car sale that a buyer went into the used car lot and they agreed on a price. And so Reuven is supposed to buy the car. And they agreed on a price, and Reuven says, I'm coming back tomorrow with the money. They already agreed on a price. And then that afternoon, Shimon comes in, sees the car, and offers the same price, and the seller sells it to him. And then the next morning, Reuven comes in, and where's the car? I said, all right, I sold it to Shimon yesterday. And now the question is whether Shimon is an HaMehapech b'charara. We'll talk about that. There's another interesting case, really complicated, and it brings in two other cases. This is really messy. And this gets into more Israeli law. Maybe Pinchas was Pinchas here? Yeah, Pinchas may have to say something about it, but it also relates to Israeli law. The case was like this, that there's a real estate agent that has exclusivity on a building. And he's the exclusive agent for the building, and a buyer comes to him and chooses an apartment, and they negotiate a price, and they agree on the price with the agent, and they're supposed to go tomorrow to the contractor to sign a contract, because the contract is always signed with the contractor. And meanwhile, unbeknownst to the agent, somebody goes directly to the contractor. He didn't go to the agent, even though it says the agent has exclusivity, and somebody went to the contractor and offered the contractor a little more money than the price that the agent had negotiated, and they signed a contract. Okay? And then when the first guy comes to the contractor to sign the contract, he says, I'm very sorry, I already sold that apartment to somebody else. Okay, so now is the second guy an HaMehapech b'charara that he has to forego the deal or not. So at the end, we're going to talk about these cases, but let's see the Rabbi Moshe Feinstein a little bit inside some of the things that he has to say. Okay, and then we'll come back to those. The other two cases I'll have to tell you outside, and you guys can think yourselves about what you think would be the right outcome. So let's go into the Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. We laid out the question in the first paragraph. And he writes like this. So again, a lot depends on exactly. The bottom is missing. The bottom is missing.
But is this the Igros Moshe and Even HaEzer?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay. There's one line missing. I have to read it for you. The bottom line I see. I think in your documents, the bottom line is rubbed out. Correct? Or not? You have the bottom line.
Which page?
It's still on the first page. Right, Simon Tzadik Aleph. It was a 3-page document.
Okay.
Seems
you
okay.
have the bottom line. Hinei kol zman shelo hichlitu beinehem.
Yeah, it's clear. It's clear.
Yeah.
So I'm missing it. Hinei kol zman shelo hichlitu beinehem shenigmar hashiduch. Shehu ohi mistapkim adayim be'etzem hadavar. Okay, im hu tov lifneihem. Oh, afrak be'ezet t'nayim binyanei mamo. Meaning they haven't finalized. Nothing was finalized. All right, because, in Shidduchim, when there's disagreements over anything, they could end up not making the shidduch. So barur sheleka din mahapech b'charar. For sure, a second guy, as long as they haven't finalized anything, somebody else can come in and try to get a shidduch with the girl. Daf binyanei mekach hamemkar pasak harama. We have the famous, right? We know that from the Mordechai. The din mahapech b'charara hu keshekvar posku hadamim shebinehem. Vein mechusar melakinyan. The only time mahapech b'charara kicks in is when the only thing missing is a kinyan. Avali mechusarim adayin hapsika Shamocha rotza bekach v'akona rotza yoter bezol. We said explicitly, mutar lacher liknoso beini mamocher akum beini mamocher Yisrael. And the Sma says, Lo miboim mamocher Yisrael shetakanas mocher Yisrael. We always want to worry about the welfare of the seller. And even if the seller is a non-Jew, kal v'chomer, if the seller is a Jew, we can't lock the seller into the first guy who starts running having a negotiation with him. If the seller says I'm not going to go for less and the buyer isn't going to give more, of course somebody can go in. Okay, and the only thing we said is that it could be that if they're still in negotiations, you got to stay out. But once the seller or the buyer walks away, then for sure you can step in. Okay, and of course that's ridiculous that because the guy lowballs a price that locks everybody else out. That for sure we always protect the seller, and a buyer can't walk in, lowball a price, and think that now he eliminated all other buyers.
Rabbi Karlinsky, based on what you've said, I think in the last two shiurim, wouldn't it also be the case that if the seller just said no, come back to me when you're willing to give a reasonable price?
Absolutely.
Then the buyer wouldn't be. We don't need a special way to prevent someone from locking everyone else out, because the seller is able to do it just by saying, I'm not interested in talking with you, I'm not negotiating with you.
No, again, okay, I mean, you're asking them, you're saying the Mordechai is pshita. That's really what you're asking,
I guess.
The Mordechai is pshita. Okay, so that's the question, is whether the Mordechai, I'll tell you where the Mordechai is gray. We're in negotiations. You and I are negotiating, okay? And we're still negotiating. And I want to give you 10,000 and you want 11,000. Okay? Well, no, they're back and forth. So can somebody walk in and offer you 11,000 while we're still negotiating? So it's possible that according to the Mordechai, the answer is yes. Whereas some of the other later Achronim want to say no. As long as they're in negotiations, you can't go in. Mm-hmm. Okay? But that's exactly how we apply the Mordechai. Anyway, continues Reb Moshe. Baruch shemocher Yisrael kuli amo lo pligi de'ech efshir lahachshiv zel ledavar osur lahafsid hamocher. V'la'odiv din zeh midina de bar metzra shu takana af lahotzi b'dayonim shelo tiklu sheyesh bizeh is a pseid afilu mu'etes lamocher. Remember, bar metzra, we paskin that the second guy who bought it, the buyer who bought it, instead of allowing the bar metzra to buy it, the bar metzra can come and kick him off the property. Okay, but that's clearly only if the seller doesn't have any loss from that. But the minute the seller has a loss, we insulate the buyer from bar metzra to protect the mocher. So certainly here in negotiations, we certainly have to protect the mocher, and we can't keep anybody out if that's going to be at the expense of the mocher. We saw this in the bar mitzvah cases. Kol shekin did HaMehapech b'charor shurak le'isur shaleka sheyeh mizeh pseida lamocher v'lekach afim yachliku al haramah b'mocher akum lo yachliku b'moich Yisrael. Again, it's clear that if the Jew, let's not get into the difference between a goy and a Jew. It's very clear that there's no onei HaMehapech b'charor until every detail has been finalized. If it hasn't been finalized, then there's no mahapech b'charor, no din of mahapech b'charor. B'im came. Kol shekain b'shiduchim, shekol zman shelo ichitu ligmor ha'inyan mishnei hatzdadim, ein bezeh din mahapech b'charora lekulei alma, she'ein lecha hefsed gadol mizeh, shetia nara muchrechet linasei rak la'rishon shenishtadik la. Right, because the shadchan offer the first shidduch, and now they're talking about whether they want to get married or not, and now nobody else can come in, and you can't have a bigger loss for the girl than that. Mishum sheneso lekol olam lisanena. L'lachein boru shemuter l'chulei alma v'lo mi boy l'shitas ramah shav below tam hefsed l'nara leka din mehapech b'charora below hushvu b'nei, meaning as long as the shidduch is still in any kind of negotiations, then anybody else can try to get the shidduch. Aval in kvar yichlitu ligmor hashidduch ach she'adayin lo nasa hakinyan shenoagim lasos bigmar shiduchim uchedome. Right, again, what we would call tanaim. Totally zebedin hefker umatana. Shaliesh omrim arishon shushitas tosfos varosh, that there's no anei mahapech in hefker. Leka b'shiduchim isra mahapech. Why? Here's a tricky one. You can't tell the second guy. What's the whole spar in Hefker? The reason why Rabbeinu Tam holds that there's no HaMehapech b'charara by Hefker is you can't tell the second guy who's trying to get it, go find it somewhere else. That's why there's no din of Nikra Rasha by Hefker. So you can't tell the second guy who wants this girl, go find a girl somewhere else. He wants this girl. All right, he's got his eyes on this girl, and therefore he says, Rav Moshe, yesh kapeda gedola la'adam kisherotza bo bezu yoter me'be'acheres. Okay, and afilu lo hoysa mishudechas haya matir me'acher shechavitz ba yoter me'be'acheres af shehosa mistabke. Anyway, there's a whole case about this where it talks about it, and it's clear that there is this idea that when somebody has their eyes set on a specific woman, you can't say go find somebody else. L'lachein, I'm just skipping to the third to the last line. L'lachein hu kehefker umatana shaleka l'ditu denim hachbech v'charara. As far as the second guy is concerned, we relate to the woman as if it was a matana, and the first guy's trying to get a matana, and the second guy's allowed to come in and say, matana, I can't find that somewhere else. All right, v'amamasik shvarzo iker. But according to Rashi, where we say the minute, remember what Rashi said. Rashi, why are you going mixing into this guy's business? According to Rashi, that if there was already an agreement between them, it's even though it's right then even though it's a you can say it's a hefker, we say you're a Russia. Aval kishenasa hakinyan should know this is all before the kinyan. Aval kishenaso hakinyan should know agim afsha hakinyan lisa. Lo moil. Even though they made a kinyan, it's not really a kinyan, says the Rabbi Moshe, because when they make a kinyan in Shidduchim, it's dvarim ba'alma. It's dvarim, okay? And there's a cherem not to break the shidduch, and he's going to say that's relevant here, okay? But you can't talk about the kinyan being irrevocable. Okay, I've got to, again, I lost my last couple of lines here. Okay, aval imkvar ichlitu ligmor hashidduch. Okay. One second. I'm sorry, I read that already. Yeah. Okay. Right. Aval inkvar hichlitu ligmor hashidduch. Ach adayin lo nasa hakinyan shenogim lasos bigmar shiduchim. Toli ze bedin hefker umat. I'm sorry. I'm reading over again. Aval. I'm sorry. I read that already. Okay. I'm sorry because I got a couple of lines cut off. Aval kishenasa hakinyan. Right, and that's where we're up to. Aval kishenasa hakinyan shenogim afsha hakinyan lisa zed lo moil. Dahavi lekikinyan dvarim kirisa b'sma. V'im kein lasovrim dehefker umatana leka din mahapich b'charara. Gam achar hakinyan ein lio din zed, because the kinyan is really not an irreversible thing. Mikol makom, here he has another dimension here. Osur mitzad hacherem sheyesh bebitul shiduchim. In other words, even though it's mitzad HaMehapech b'charara, you might be able to go in because it's not a real kinyan, but then there's a cherem. There's a cherem not to break a shidduch. The eno mitzad kinyan mahani lezeh el mishum dekivin noagu lasos kinyan lo have gemara davar mamash kol ze shelo asu kinyan v'im noagu dafka b'ksivas tanayim lo have gemara le b'ksivas hatanayim have ke hitnu al menashi yichtavu shtar. Okay, v'lachein im ichlitu ligmor hashiduchim v'lo yasu shum davar lo kinyan v'lo ksivas tanayim kamo shenoagim harbe bekan. Even though he may not have a din of HaMehapech b'charara, okay, but there's certainly he's violating the cherem of not to break a shidduch, okay, and therefore, all right, and therefore the second guy is causing a breakup of a shidduch, which is a cherem, okay. All right, let's skip a few lines here. Rav Moshe just brings his shita. Rav Moshe holds that you don't need to have tznayim at all. Okay, Rav Moshe's whole shita is that once you're at the wedding, there's a pro forma form for Rav Moshe and tznayim because you don't want to get married without tznayim. Rav Moshe here is alluding to his shita that you don't really need tznayim. And we've with the Bali Tshuva weddings where unless the mother really wants to break the plate, some of them though, I got to break the plate. Okay, so we write a tznayim right before the wedding so they can break a plate. Okay, but skip to after the parentheses. All right, so after the parentheses, v'im kein osur lacherim lishtadek lo v'ligrum she tavor al acherim. Meaning, once they agreed on the shidduch, then even though there's no ani HaMehapech b'charara, because it's not called pisuk damim, but it's certainly violating the cherem of breaking the shidduch. Nimtza shebebininatenu kan kishelo hitnu beit sheichlitu ligmor ha'inyan la'asot klum shebarov pamim hem kvar b'shem chosen v'kala teikef achrei achlata. Right, everybody understands that once they agree, they got engaged, and everybody calls them chosen and kala. So afshalek isur mitzad mahapech b'charara, according to Rashi, but there's still an issue about the cherem, and therefore, once they're calling each other chas and kala, you're not allowed to step in. The second guy is definitely not allowed to step in. Okay? And Mistaber, skip to the next paragraph. Mistaber la'aniyos daiti dachar sheish cherem yesh memele gam isur mahapech b'charara. So then he turns it. If there's a cherem, there's also mahapech b'charara. Why? Da be'etzem af behefker hu mahapech b'charara sheikvar mahapech ba chavero v'yesh be'etzem inyan ha'isur. Rak savrei atosvos. Tosfos holds that if I, as the ani, am trying to get it, I can't lock other people out if it's hefker. But here, the fact that we already created a situation of cherem, that allows me to lock the other person out also. Right? In other words, once there's a cherem, you can tell the other guy, I'm sorry, you can't cause me to lose something because of the cherem. Okay, so there's basically he's saying that it could be, let's skip to the top of the next column. Okay, you know what? I don't think, let's go. Okay. Nire, okay. Shegam, that's mentioned in the Ramah. Shegam b'mecher im bekanhu bezol. If you remember that when and this is going to come into the other questions we have. If Ruvain is trying to get something very cheap, and Shimon comes in and gets it cheap, there are many shitas that hold that's like a mitzia. Okay. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, there's no ani mahapech b'charara, even though it's a business deal, even though the Ramban doesn't agree with that. Shegam b'mecher im bekanhu bezol shelo motzi b'makom acher leka isur mahapech b'charara. The Ramban shev yashach sover de b'mecher af bezol lo yuchal leaknoso b'makom acher nami osur. Okay, that if you can't find it cheap somewhere else, so then it's osur to step in because the first guy is going to have a loss. Sharadach sover b'ketam echad, like Rashi. Shalaken kiven shelo motzi b'mekach zeh b'makom acher. In other words, if you hold that by hefker, and if you hold by hefker, there's also ani HaMehapech b'charara. So a mecher bizol. What's the svara? Why you say by hefker, there's also ani HaMehapech b'charara? What are you missing in? But if there's no hefker, we say go find it somewhere else. But if it's a mecher bizol, you can't say go find it somewhere else. Kiven shelo motzi b'mekach zeh b'makom acher. Hefsed ha'acherim adif. We say, well, we gotta protect the rights of the second guy who also wants to get it bizol. The Ramban sover ketam beis shelechein b'mecher kiven shelekol lokeach hayamocher b'mekach zeh v'lo haya chaser rak hahipuch v'atircha shelokeach nechshav kikana le'inyan ha'isur rak b'matana b'hefker leka din hefker. Again, the question is, how do we look at a business deal that's being done cheaply? And since the seller would sell to anybody, if the seller will sell to anybody at that cheap price, so according to the Ramban, he wants to say, right? Again, the Ramban sover, right? According to Rabbeinu Tam, shalachein b'mecher kiven shelekol lokeach hayamocher b'mecher zeh v'lo haya chaser rak hahipuch v'atircha nechshav kikana le'inyan ha'isur, that the first guy has rights. The first guy has rights that he should not lose. V'rak b'matana v'hefker leka din mahapech. Okay, because the second guy can't get it at all. But when it's a deal, it's a deal. We can tell you to go find other deals. Anyway, but he continues the Rebbe Moshe. Al kol panim l'shnei tamim elu kivan shemishudechet yesh kvar alea iser cherem. See, once we introduce the idea of a cherem, okay, on the first guy to break the shidduch, okay, milit charet mizel lenase leacher nimsa sheleka bo kvar schus laacherim. Lishtarech lo. That takes the right of anybody else. You see, normally with Hefker, we say the fact that the first guy's going after it doesn't deprive the other people of rights. That's the Shitas Rabbeinu Tam. Then it's Hefker. So you're trying to get Hefker. Your attempt to get Hefker can't deprive other people of trying to get it. But if there's a cherem, that cherem could deprive other people of the right to step in, and that would activate Anei HaMehapech B'Charara also. So you would actually be called a Rasha if you stepped in. That V'leka tam echad v'hi kvar knuya lo le'inyan isur zeh. Meaning, once there's a cherem, that locks anybody else out. V'leka tam beis u'memela asur lacherem lishtarech lo gam mitzad isur mapet b'charara. Kivan deleka hatamim demisalik isur mahapet b'charara kebehefker matana. In other words, even though you can't tell this guy, here's the hefker matana. We said that we have to treat it like hefker. Why? We can't tell this guy go find another girl. He wants this girl. He wants this girl. So you can't say it's like it's you right. You can't say that it's like it's like a mech. He wants this girl. You can't say go find a girl somewhere else. Okay, and therefore it's like hefker, where according to Rabbeinu Tam, there's no mahapech b'charara. However, says Rabbi Moshe, but once there's a cherem which would have a big hefsei to the chassan, so then that locks the other guy out. He wants this girl, too late. The other guy already has a rights in it, and you can't treat it like hefker and matan. Was there a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, looking at this paragraph, is there sort of a difference between the harara in the Gemara, which was actually a role, versus a harara, which is a person, like an employee or the woman, right? Because here it sounds, I'm having difficulty knowing what the actual situation is with the second guy. Has the second guy been talking to her and like she's also interested? In which case she has agency and stuff, and like you said, it's not a kinyan, she's not locked. It's not kiddushin. It's just an informal thing. Dvarim sheba alma. Or is she like the harara actually? And so really the only question is on the second guy.
I can't answer the question the way you phrased it because I don't want to turn the girl into a harara. Okay, but the idea is you said it. The second guy, is he locked out or not? That's always the question. Anei HaMehapech b'charara. Does that lock bo acher v'notla? Does that lock the guy out? Okay, so according to Tosfos, if it's hefker, it doesn't lock the guy out. If it's a mecher, it locks the guy out once there's piece of dummy. Okay, right. So it's always the question what the first guy did. You have to, the way Ramesh is formulating it is, Anei HaMehapech b'charara means when the first guy is a mahapech b'charara, is that enough to lock out a second guy? Because if it's enough to lock out a second guy and he comes along anyway, then he's a Russian. But if what the first guy did is not enough to lock out the second guy, as Rabbeinu Tam holds in Hefker, in pure Hefker or Matana. So when Reuven is trying to get something that's Hefker or Matana, he's trying to get it until he makes a kinyan, then you can't call that locking out the second guy. So here Rav Moshe is saying, well, if they're still in shidduch negotiations, the second guy, you certainly can't lock the second guy out. Okay? Especially since he wants this girl. But right. once they became chassan kala, and now and at that point says Rav Moshe, it's still they came chassan kala, but they still don't have pisug damim. So directly it doesn't lock out the second guy. Mitzad, the direct law of Anei HaMehapech b'charara. But Rav Moshe's chiddush is that since there's a cherem on the first guy to break the shidduch, so he created a situation where he can't break the shidduch because of cherem. So now if the second guy steps in, and technically he's allowed to take the girl because they haven't made any kinyan, but what he will be doing is he will be causing the first guy to violate the cherem, okay, or the girl to violate the cherem, okay, and therefore that locks the second guy out. And therefore he turns into a mahapech b'charara.
So that means that the Isser is on her as well. Once she's done the Tanaim, she sees someone else in the store and she likes him, she can't go to that guy.
That happens to be a very important point because here we don't have a buyer and a seller between the guy and the girl. Both of them are, quote, buyers. In other words, if she will break the shidduch, she'll also be violating the cherem. Okay? But again, it's usually, but the reason we're focusing on that is because if a second guy wants to be mishadech with her, does she want? Obviously, she would want. And Reuven wants to stop the second guy from coming in. So the role we're assigning roles here, so to speak. That Reuven is the first buyer of the girl, so to speak. All of this is virtual, okay, and therefore he's trying to stop the second guy from coming in. Okay,
it just means that if she wants out, she has to get out, and then she can speak to the second guy.
For sure. But then she would see. Well, once they became chas and kala, she'll be violating the cherem.
Does this cherem lock someone in? I mean, I forget. This is my first time ever hearing about this cherem. So
it's viewed very, again, in halacha, in Jewish minhagim halacha, it's viewed very seriously to break a shidduch. Mm-hmm. People do it, and it's viewed very seriously, not to break a shidduch. Again, I don't know how applicable it is today. You'll have to speak to the rabbanim that deal with these questions. But I do know that there were times when there was that right before the wedding, the shidduch went sour, and instead of breaking the shidduch, they said, "Get married and take a get." Mm-hmm. That's how serious it was. Again, I don't think they don't say that today, but it was once viewed very seriously to break a shidduch. Okay, that's the cherem that we're talking about. Okay.
And again, what is the condition or conditions that activate the cherem?
That's a good question. I can't answer that question specifically. I guess what it means is that they made an agreement, okay? They even might have made some kind of a kinyan that they will get married, which again, Moshe says that kinyan doesn't really work because it's a kinyan on doing something. Okay, it's like, I promise I'm going to give you $100 next week. You don't trust me? Fine. We'll make a kinyan chalipin that I'm going to give you $100 next week. That's a kinyan dvarim. It doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't really have any teeth. Okay, but says Rav Moshe, but you know what? But it activates the cherem. Okay, again, let's not get too sidetracked here because again we get into the nitty gritty here of all kinds of shidduch situations. The point here is that we need to decide at what point we activate HaMehapech b'charara. And let me just see how much more we want to see here. Let's skip to the page Reish Mem Aleph. Skip the page Reish Mem Aleph. Okay, Yotzalan Midin. Again, Rav Moshe goes through. You guys have the paper. You can go through all of the different permutations. Okay. But Yotzalan Nadina. Let's get the summary. Now you see where I'm on the left column on page Reish Mem Aleph. Yotzalan Ladina. Shekol zman shelo huskam bein shneim ligmor hashiduchim leka shum isur lacherim lishtarich lo. Nowadays we wouldn't even consider this because nowadays we tell the guys, you're going out with one girl, you're going out with a guy. Decide whether you're going to marry. Don't be going out with two guys or two girls at the same time. But apparently in those days it wasn't so rare. Again, because the whole shidduch system worked very differently. Okay? And therefore, if they did not decide that they're getting married, the girl can still go out with another guy, and the other guy is not limited to try to ask the girl out for a date. Nigmar ha'inyan b'makom she'aderech lasot kinyan o ksivas t'nayim la'achshivam b'shem chasen kala v'adayin lo osu. But if the minhag is to write t'nayim, and they didn't yet write the Tanayim, i.e. that's what happens in engagements, then Talui Zeh b'machlokas hefker matana, because the girl has a status of hefker, okay, and therefore according to Rashi you're not allowed, but according to Rabbeinu Tam you would be allowed, because at the end of the day they didn't make any kind of a finalization. Ume'achar sharama pasak svar rishona, meaning like Rabbeinu Tam. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, if they haven't yet finalized anything, okay, so then the second guy can try to get the girl. Here's a perfect example. We talk about this all the time. People somehow or other, in certain areas where it's very easy to be machmir, they're super machmir. I mean, kashrus, super machmir. But if there's ever a monetary dispute, somehow or other they always look to find the lenient shita that lets them keep the money. Okay, And that's where Moshe was saying, wait a minute. If you're a Yorei Hashem, there is Shitas Rashi. There is a Shitas Rashi. And you know what? According to Rashi, what you're doing is absolutely inappropriate. Okay, you're a Ba'achar V'Naklad Nikra Russia. According to Rashi, you're a Russia. So he says, we paskin like Rabbeinu Tam. So you're not a Russia. But he writes, Min aroi liyorei Hashem lahachmir lachush l'svar achrona shi shitas Rashi. It's a perfect example of Rav Moshe's sensitivity, where we're out of sync. We love to be machmir in Chalav Yisrael, and we love to be mekil in our dinei mamonis. Okay, and Rav Moshe, of course, held exactly the opposite. Okay, v'im kvar asu kinyan oksivas tnayim o aflo asu klum b'mekomo she'ein noagim b'dafka lasod zeh. In other words, either when they write a tnayim or in a place where the meaning is not to write the tnayim and they still consider chas and kala. Okay, kamo b'medina seinu b'kan demashikos v'bishas achupa eino klum ta'af b'mekomo she'noagim aval hem lo chashbu lasos. People make it, but they didn't do it. So he says, if the minhag is that this is what we do, then even if they didn't do it, they're called chas and kala, and the cherem kicks in. So then we trace it. So he says again. So he says like this. Okay, in other words, that when people consider them chas and kala, so then Rav Moshe says it's a double whammy, because then after they're considered chas and kala, even though they didn't do anything to actually lock it in, okay, but they did enough so that they're now called chas and kala, and that's the minhag of the place. So then somebody who steps in is a double whammy. First of all, he's causing a violation of the cherem, and memela, what comes out of that is that he's a HaMehapech b'charara v'nat he's a nikra Russian. Okay, so again, a lot depends on the circumstances of the community. But again, he says that when they didn't do anything, it's just a verbal agreement. Then, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you're not a nikra Russia. According to Rashi, you are. But when there are things, but they says v'imkar asu kinyan oksivas tnayim. So then, even though those aren't binding in the sense that you could break it, but the cherem doesn't let you break it, and therefore, if you do it, you're causing the guy to break a cherem, and then you're also nikra Russian. Umashe, okay, right, and now apparently, okay, yeah, all right. But he goes into another issue in Hilchos Shidduchim about getting married during Chola. There is a chashash of Shem Yikad Mena Acher. Okay, we'll leave that for now. That's anyway. He paskins like that. That it depends. It depends where the shidduch is holding. That's the bottom line. It depends where the shidduch is holding, whether you're called a Russia or not. Okay. All right. So now let me bring in the case. I'll read you the case. I mean, you heard the case of the car rental, of the car buying. So what do you guys think? Let's think. Let's now throw it back to you. Okay, because it's a 4-page tshuva, and he goes from every side and every side and every side. But the story is pretty clear. Reuven comes in on Monday morning, and he sets a price with the car dealer. Going to pay you $20,000 for this car. I like it. You like it. That's the price, $20,000. Tomorrow I'm coming in with the money. And that afternoon, Shimon comes in, and he likes the car, and he offers to buy it with cash, and the seller takes the cash. The next morning, Reuven comes in and says, what happened to my car? And the car seller says, I'm very sorry. Somebody came and offered me cash. I sold it to him.
Well, there was Pisuk Damim.
Yeah, that is Ani B'charar. I mean, there's nothing. They made a deal, and then the other guy comes in and takes it.
Didn't we see a case in the Gemara where money now trumps money later?
Also, the second guy, he doesn't know about the first guy.
Yeah, so that's clear. The second guy did not know. That also has to do with the question: do you hold that when a person was mahapech b'charar and he didn't know, does that make him a Russia or not? So Rav Moshe paskins clearly that it makes him a Russia. Okay, Rav Moshe, even though some Rishonim hold not, but Rav Moshe says, I read the Gemara. And I read the Gemara and I read the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't make any distinction, says Rav Moshe, whether the second guy knew or he didn't know. The Shulchan Aruch says one guy's trying to buy, the second guy's a Russia, without saying that it matters whether he knew or not. And in the case of Rav Gidl, it sounds like unless you go like the Ritva, that what Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha was doing was Midas Chasidus. He was demanding Midas Chasidus. But if he wasn't demanding Midas Chasidus, he was demanding that Rabbi Abba reverse it. So that means Rabbi Abba was a Rasha, even though Rabbi Abba did it by accident. So Reb Moshe holds that he's considered a Rasha even if he did it by accident. So the second guy clearly did it by accident. And as you guys say, there was Pisuk Damim. But Josh raises the only opening here where can the sellers, it was the seller lo beseder.
But how can somebody become a Russia without even knowing about it? That sounds way out. The second guy,
I think we had this argument on the second or third shear, if you remember.
If anybody, the seller is messing up here.
Wait,
O'Neill, you're a few weeks late.
Okay, wait, no, wait. See, I allowed the argument to happen way back. But after we saw Reb Moshe, it says explicitly that when you don't know, you're still a Rasha. And Reb Moshe proved it both from the failure of the Shulchan Aruch to make a distinction and the simple pshat in the Gemara. So your question is, not how could it be, but why is it? You have to know the right answer. The answer is...
And how does the second guy fix it?
By giving it back. In other words, you want it. I'll tell you exactly how you fix it.
But the first guy doesn't even know about the second guy. They don't know each other.
Oh no, wait, no.
The seller is the only guy who knows what's going on here.
No, wait, no. Why? Eventually, the first guy's going to find out about it. The first guy did Pisuk Damim. Reuven came on Tuesday morning, and he made an agreement that he's coming back on Wednesday morning with the money. Okay, and when he comes back Wednesday morning with the money, the car was already sold. So Reuven now knows what happened. So Reuven pulls Shimon into court and say, "You're a Rasha. You want to be a Ois Rasha? You gotta sell me the car back," which is exactly what Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha told Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba, did he know that what he did? He did it by accident or on purpose?
By accident.
Was he called a Rasha?
Yes.
But there's remedy. Again, you can't make me a Rasha for life with no remedy when I did it by accident. That's clear. But there's a simple remedy. The simple remedy is, okay, you got it without knowing. We tell Shimon, you paid the guy money for the car to the car dealer. Okay, let Reuven pay you the money that he was going to pay. Remember, we got to know all the money. Reuven wanted to pay the car dealer the money. The car dealer said the car's not here anymore. Who has the car? Shimon has the car. So Reuven goes to Shimon and says, "You are on it. You are HaMehapech b'charara b'achar v'natla. So you have to give me the car and get your money back." And if Shimon doesn't, if we're going to call Shimon a Rasha, he has an easy way out by giving the car, by taking the money and giving the car. Now we get into another machlokas. Even if he's a Rasha, is he chayiv to do it, as Rabbeinu Tam says, or it's just he could do it, right? But Beis Din can't. Rabbeinu Tam says Beis Din can force it. All of the other Rishonim say Mapito, you can't force. Right? He's a Rasha. He did it. He made a legitimate kinyan. If he's ready to walk around with the stain of a Rasha, what can you do? But Rabbeinu Tam says no. Rabbeinu says you force. It's judicial. But all the other Rishonim say you can't force him. If he's ready to walk around as a Rasha, there's nothing to do because he made a legitimate kinyan. So that's the perfect case here with the car. Shimon bought the car legitimately. He made a kinyan. He gave the seller the money. It was the seller. The seller wasn't a good guy. Okay, but at the end of the day, we always say we protect the seller. The seller did it. As Josh said, the seller's interest was, wait a minute. Who knows whether he's going to come back tomorrow with the money? He promised he's going to come back with the money. I took the money because I know the guy's here with cash, and I took the money. So the seller is innocent here. The seller is innocent, okay? Unless maybe he should have told Shimon, I have another buyer, but the seller is innocent. But now Shimon found out the next morning, Shimon found out that he bought a car that was supposed to go to Reuven. So that's exactly the case of, by accident, you were a Mahapech, you were Bo'achar v'natla. And therefore, to be Ois Rashi, you got to sell him the car. That seems to be the simple psak.
I'm not comfortable with that one.
What do you want to say, Efraim?
I'm not comfortable to say that he's a Rasha, but we don't force him.
Oh, you're a Rabbeinu Tam man. That's fine. You're a Rabbeinu Tam man. But wait a minute. Whoa. Wait a minute. Just a minute. Hold on. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Did Shimon buy the car legally?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, how do you
Shimon is the
force?
first or the second?
Shimon's the second guy. Shimon's the guy who came in the afternoon with the money.
He paid cash, yeah.
And he's got the car now. And Reuven came in on Wednesday morning and said, "Where's my car?" Shimon has it. So the seller is out of the equation now. Now Reuven pulls Shimon in and said, "I was trying to buy the car." All right, and he can prove it. And you took it. And Shimon says, if Shimon says, "I made a legitimate kinyan," yes. What are the consequences of what I did? Nikra Rasha. Freeze frame. If Shimon is ready to walk around with that, how can Beis Din force Shimon to sell the car to Reuven?
Yeah, if Beis Din can't force him, then why is he called a Russia?
No, he called her Russia. Wait. He called her Russia because he took something that Reuven was mahapik with. He did it by accident. Just a minute. You can do something if you were Machal Shabbos by accident. Are you a Machal Shabbos? Yes. Here we go. We had this already. You're Machal Shabbos b'shogeg. Okay, but at the end of the day, you're a Machal Shabbos b'shogeg. Therefore,
that make you a Russia?
You're Machal Shabbos b'shogeg. You're not a Russia.
You're an Avarion. You're worse than a Russia. You're an Avarion unless you do tshuva. Then you have to bring a korban chatas. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you had to bring a korban chatas. You're called an Avarion. By the way, Avarion is worse than a Russia. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I take it back. No, sorry. Avarion is less than a Russia. Avarion is less. Again, you can do something wrong by accident. And let me help you. Since it's reversible, you can't say it's not fair that I'm being called a Russia. I did it by accident. If you really say you did it by accident, so undo what you did by accident, and you're Ois Russia. It's because you're digging in and saying, "I got there first. Too bad, you lost it." So that's the whole din of HaMehapech b'charara. The u'ba'achar not l'nikra Russia. That's why Rabbeinu Tam says that if it's a davar shel hefker, he's not a Russia. But in a business deal, we say, "What are you doing? What? Go find a different business deal. Why are you muscling it on this guy's business? Why are you taking this guy's business deal away?" Again, I think that you're what's bothering you is the fact that let me ask you: if he did it on purpose, should he be called a Russian?
That's different. Yeah, sure.
Why? It's a free market. It's a free market. I got there before you. You didn't give the money. I came in. I bought it.
If he did it on purpose and he knew there was the first guy there, the first guy thought that he bought it.
No, he didn't buy it. He didn't give money. He made an agreement.
But
he's coming tomorrow morning.
He thought he has a kinyan on the car.
No, not at all. Not at all. No. Full transparency. The seller tells Shimon, "You should know that there's a guy who wants the car. We agreed on $20,000. He's coming tomorrow with the money." And I, as Shimon, will say to the seller, "Did he make a kinyan?" No, just verbal agreement. "Well, here's my cash. I'd like to buy the car. Do you think I'm Beseder or Lo Beseder?"
The buyer, the second buyer.
The second buyer.
I think he's Beseder because the first guy didn't have a kinyan.
Okay, so you just described ani HaMehapech b'charara ubo acher v'natla. So you don't think that the second guy is a Russian?
That's fine,
but the Gemara says he is. Okay, the Gemara says he is. The Gemara says that once we'll use the Rabbeim, we'll use the Mordechai. Once there's pisuk damim, an agreed price, no kinyan. Remember, if there's a kinyan, it's nothing to talk about. No kinyan, a verbal agreement. That's exactly the din. Ani HaMehapech b'charara u'ba'achar v'natla nikra Rasha. You're a Rasha. Is it reversible? It's reversible, and it might not be judiciable, but you're a Rasha. Do you understand that if he did it on purpose, he's a Russia? Or you think, look, this is a free market economy, right? You didn't make a kinyan, I can come in and do whatever I want.
So why isn't Mr. Shimon with the cash a Russia?
He is. That's our psak. The psak here was Shimon is a Russian. And what does it mean, a Russia? It means that Reuven can take Shimon Reuven can go to Shimon, confront him. I was there first. I was supposed to buy the car. You didn't know. You didn't know, and therefore take the money that you paid and let go of the car. Because you by mistake bought a car that was already, quote, spoken for.
And the seller has no liability because he could just say, "Look, the guy offered me the money. It's not my problem."
In this case, the seller can say, "Here, I'll give you another example. There's another example, okay? And here, okay, let me read it to you. Let me find it here and read it here. Where is it here? I don't want. Oh, I'm sorry, it's here. Very interesting case where there's somebody wants to rent an apartment. Okay, somebody wants to rent an apartment and they agree on the price. Okay, they agree on the price, and here's very very subtle differences. So they agree on a price. Okay, and before they make the kinyan, a second family comes to rent the house, and the owner of the house prefers to rent to the second family over the first family. And therefore he rents to the second family because he prefers the second family. See, so then it's very likely that the second family is not called a Russia. Because otherwise you would be taking away, in other words, if the second family is going to be afraid to rent, even though the owner wants to rent to them, I'm so happy, I much prefer to rent to you. Right? That other family has a rent. I had no choice. I had no other customers. I had to rent to them. But had I known you were around, I definitely would rent to you. Now that I know you're around, I want to rent to you. As long as he hadn't made a kinyan yet. So the owner is certainly allowed to rent to the second family. And we could claim that the second family is not a Russia anymore because the owner wants to rent to them. He prefers them. And that would open the door here. I think you guys were alluding to that. Is that maybe the second guy in the car, since he's paying cash, as Josh said, the seller might prefer the cash guy on Tuesday afternoon rather than take his chances of waiting till Wednesday morning for the guy coming in with the money. If that's true, in other words, if he would have told, see, here's the point. If he tells the Shimon, Shimon, I already made an agreement to sell to Reuven tomorrow with cash. But you know what? If you give me cash now, I'll sell to you because I prefer your cash now than hoping that Reuven's going to come tomorrow morning. Then that might get Shimon off the hook. Now, if it can be demonstrated that the reason he took it is because a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, maybe that would be an argument to get Shimon off the hook. Yeah,
I think that's great, and in that situation where bird in hand, that's a great situation. And that answers the question. I think going back to Ephraim's discomfort with calling him a Russia, I think it's fair to say that. Yeah, fine. So we all, in our heart, feel, we all know what a kinyan is, and until there's a kinyan, so nothing happened. And we're used to thinking about that. Mikudeshet, not mikudeshet, right? We know that kind of thing. On the other end, this was something where Chazal came in and they said, we want to do additional social engineering above and beyond the law. And in our additional social engineering, we want to prevent in cases where there's not this, cash tomorrow is worse than cash today. If we're not talking about that, we want to socially engineer our society so that the second guy has a sword over his head, as it were, until he sells it back. And the sword is that he's going to be called a Russian. That's what we want to do. That we realize there is no kinyan.
I'll just add, I'll help Ephraim get a little over his hump, because there are Rishonim that say all of this whole din of HaMehapech b'charora and the second guy's Nikar Russia emanates from Vasisa Yosher Vatov. We're basically telling the second guy, Asisa Yosher Vatov, let go. That guy was there first. There was a piece of dummy. Don't mix it. Asisa Yosher Vatov. How's that, Ephraim? Can you live that way?
Makes me feel a little better.
I figured it would. Yeah. Okay. All right. So these are very interesting cases. Again, the case of the contractor. So let me just go back to that case. So again, Reuven settles to buy an apartment from the realtor who has an exclusive. Meanwhile, Shimon came and went directly to the contractor and signed a contract with him for more money. He gave him more money. That's why the contractor was ready to bypass the realtor. And then the realtor, now the guy who bought from the realtor, walks in to sign the contract, and the contractor says, "I'm sorry, the apartment's sold already." So now can Reuven go to the second guy and call him a Mahapech b'charora v'nitlo nikra Russia? So again, it's tricky, but apparently, since the contractor has benefit by selling to the second guy because the guy offered him money, you can't force the second guy who bought it legitimately to lose his rights. Okay, because apparently there'll be a penalty if the second guy knows. Reuven doesn't want to pay the higher price. Reuven wants to pay the price he agreed upon. But he has no claim on the contractor. He might have a claim on the real estate agent. Right? What did you do to me? But it's a very messy situation because everybody operated in good faith, right? The buyer and the real estate agent operated in good faith. The contractor was allowed to sell to a guy who came directly to him without going to the real estate agent, and therefore, when all
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. He wasn't. If the contractor gave exclusivity to the real estate agent, he was not allowed to accept a client outside of the real estate agent.
Okay, so let me read you the
That's
claim.
what exclusivity means.
Yeah, okay. Where is it here? Where were the claims here? Just a minute. So let me find the claims. The contractor is claiming that he gave exclusivity to the real estate agent did not prevent him from selling directly. You're claiming, Pinchas, that it does?
That's what exclusivity means.
Just a minute. Let me find it here.
Or in America, at the very least, the seller would have to pay a fee to the broker, even though the broker was not involved.
Yeah, but that's
Unless
not
maybe the
protection for the buyer.
He might be ready. Again, I hear he might be ready to do that. I'm not sure that's required in Israel, Pinchas. You'll tell me. In other words, what Pinchas is saying is the contract does what? So therefore, the contract is batal. The contract that the contractor signed with the second guy is invalid.
Well, in questions of contract law, bitul is not the normal remedy. What normally would happen is the court would probably let the deal go through, but they would penalize the seller for expectation of the buyer. He said, "Look, you forced the entire public to go only to this guy. I didn't want to go to your realtor. I don't like paying realtors' fees, but I wanted your apartment. I played the game. I went to your realtor. I closed the deal with him. I come back the next day, and you violated your own exclusivity contract by selling it directly to somebody else to make more money." What's the meaning of giving an exclusivity contract to a realtor if you go behind the realtor's back and sell it to other people? You're totally undermining your own credibility.
I'm trying to read here into all of the details. Apparently, the realtor's exclusivity, and this should be standard, but the realtor's exclusivity is that all he's doing is he's a mitavech, and that the deal is not finalized until the buyer signs a contract with the contractor.
Well, for sure, in terms of contract law and in terms of real estate law, without a signed contract by both parties, there's no contract with the disappointed buyer. That's for sure. But in terms of a violation of the rules of negotiation and fair negotiation, the seller totally undermined his own his whole exclusivity. He totally undermined it on his own. And for that, in my opinion, an Israeli court would the Israeli court would award damages to the disappointed buyer. Not necessarily, he wouldn't necessarily give him, the entire value of the apartment. He wouldn't get that, but he would get damages for bad faith negotiation.
Just a minute, I'm here. Okay, it's interesting. I'll just tell you you show that there are tzaddikim in the world. The whole case came to the Rov because of the second buyer. The second buyer came to the Rov to say, "Did I behave inappropriately?" Okay, and the Kabbalah is not from guy, so the Kabbalah is out of the picture. But let me just see here who he came called. Okay, Shimon. Shimon was the first guy. Who he came called Zakavi and Bifniel Beit Mishpat. V'afa metavech ka'as ma'od. Ulam hakablan ta'an. Here's the answer to your question, Pinchas. Hakablan ta'an sheyesh lo zchut limkor kol dira kol zman shelo nichtam imo zichron dvarim. Kamo came to'en hakablan shesikem im Ruven al bechir gavoa $2,000 me'amachir shesikem hametavech im Shimon. So this is an interesting legal question in Israel. What would happen? By the way, it said there was a sign. יש שלט המציין שלמתווך אחד בלעדיות על מכירת הדירות בבניין. So it could be that sign just locks other mitavchim out, but it doesn't lock the contractor out from selling directly.
It really does. It really does depend on the fine print in the exclusivity contract. But I can just tell you that in terms of the economic interests, normally what happens is that why do real estate agents want exclusivity? Because they make a tremendous investment of time and money sometimes in advertising and in running around. And believe me, I'm saying this on their behalf, even though in general I can't stand real estate agents, and they make my life miserable, and they do a lot of unethical things. But they say, I'm going to run around, I'm going to spend thousands, tens of thousands of shekels, maybe hundreds of thousands of shekels advertising your project, and some schnook is going to see my advertisement go around my back and buy from you directly. That's not fair. I'm taking upon myself all the advertisement expenses. I'm running around showing these people the apartment, and I run around to show somebody apartment, and some guy says to his cousin, I was looking at this apartment. It's really a great deal. I don't have enough money. Go directly to the contractor and buy it. This is the price. He's totally undermined the entire system, and so that's why there's exclusivity, because each side gets a benefit from the exclusivity, but like to totally circumvent the system and just say, there was no signed contract.
Okay, so two things. In the case under discussion, apparently the details of the exclusivity contract were not as exclusive as
if it was a waiver. Then okay, but maybe it was like a license.
No, and the other thing is, but just to make it, is that the second buyer paid a higher price than the asking price of the mitavech.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Again, but it could be that in the din of HaMehapech b'charara it might. In other words, again, obviously, if the seller was not within his rights to do that, okay, so then there's nothing to talk about. Apparently, al pi halacha, the seller must have been in his rights to sell to the second guy, and it's only the second guy who's coming to say, did I do something wrong? Okay, that's basically what it is. Anyway, Rabosai, it's a very interesting sugya. We come back to the issue of poaching a secretary, okay, where we do say that I'm allowed to poach a malamed, right? If there's a malamed, and I think this malamed is going to do better for my kids, then I'm allowed to. But a secretary, apparently also, if I think that the secretary is, I can't find such a good secretary anywhere, it could be that I'm allowed to try to entice her away. But you guys wrote on the chat something about the question that we had when we went to Rav Shlomo Zalman. I didn't have a chance to read the chat carefully. Does anybody remember what they wrote about whether they thought that whether we were inappropriate or appropriate to try to get guys to come from another yeshiva to us?
I didn't read that somebody posted.
Okay, Beseder. Anyway, good sugya. We're going to go on vacation now. I'm open to new sugyas. What sugya would you guys like to do next? You have 3 weeks to think about it, or at least 2 weeks. You got to give me a week to prepare if it's a sugya that I'm not familiar with. And everybody should have a meaningful fast. Hopefully we won't have to, but the Mashiach coming looks like we're not quite united enough to have Mashiach come to us. Given
do we have a starting date?
Rosh Chodesh is Thursday, Friday. Right, so Aleph is Friday, Beis is Shabbos, Sunday is Gimel El. Gimel El will be 16th. Gimel El is also Rav Kook's yahrzeit. So Gimel El will be starting. By the way, we had a grandson, Binyamin.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Okay.
Mazel tov.
Okay, everybody should have a good week, an easy fast, and we'll see you on Gimel El. Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you.